morning. I'm Ann Brennan. This is ASMM Digital Small Business Connections. And I have to tell you, I've taken a week off. I guess it makes it almost 2 weeks if I took last Monday off and went to Vermont and spent a lot of time hiking and biking and drinking, actually a whole lot of drinking, I have to be honest. And I'm come back and I'm a little off my game. I'm feeling out of sorts this morning, like I don't know what I'm doing, but hopefully you guys will forgive me for that and understand where I am going with this. So we are ASMM Digital Small Business Connections. In just like over a month, maybe a month and a half, I guess, we're going to be changing to Marketing Moms. And this will be me and Anastasia. Anastasia and I will be talking about marketing, and we're going to be doing it very strategically, starting from the very beginning of marketing, because so many people leave out the beginning. They just jump right in with 2 feet and forget how to market their business because they don't understand their brand and they don't understand their audience. So we're going to start there and we're going to be moving forward. But for now, we are still Small Business Connections, and we are still interviewing entrepreneurs. So we are the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Our idea with this podcast was to interview people who could give you something that you can put to work in your business right away. That's our goal. We want you to walk away. Actually, what I really want is for you to walk away and call the person you work with and say, oh my God, you have to listen to this podcast because I learned something so great on it today. That's what my goal is. I want you to do that. I also want to remind you, because we are streaming live, you can ask questions. When you leave a comment, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, I see that comment and I can ask our guests the comment and they can respond. They can tell you. So if you've got something, you're listening and you go, oh my gosh, this Brian Johnson guy is so smart, then ask him a question because he might have an answer for you. And that's what we're hoping you'll get out of this today. So our guest today is Brian Johnson. He is the owner of Main & Johnson, and he's down in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have been reminiscing because that's my old stomping grounds. Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Ann?
I'm good. Like I said, a little out of it because I have been out of the office and away from the computer. And by the way, they haven't discovered internet in Vermont yet.
Or is that your excuse for not being on?
No, honest to God, no internet. We had it at the very top of the mountain. It was really funny. We'd climb a mountain. We'd get to the top. There'd be a crowd of people who have also climbed the mountain. And suddenly you'd hear beep, 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 because everybody would finally have service right there.
That's funny.
But that was it. So yeah, the rest of the week I was useless. So, all right. So Brian, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so let's start with Main & Johnson, because most people are like, well, who's your partner? Why are they not on? And actually, it's one of those things where it's kind of stuck, and it's worked, but it always requires a brief explanation. And so when I started my own business a little over 3 years ago, kind of my aim, and I'll get to what I did prior to that, but coming out of the corporate world, I spent a lot of time on an airplane, and I ran into situations where I would go 3 years without ever meeting my next door neighbors. And it wasn't because I wasn't friendly. And hopefully you tell that I am. But when this kind of came about, it was like, wow, I've really never been highly connected to any community that I've been in. And so as I was kind of thinking about what do I want to do and how do I want to start this business, my initial aim was kind of the small business coaching aspect of things, and really focused on the Charlotte area. I mean, it's booming, it's growing, so it's not a bad business decision to begin with.
Right.
And I did it kind of walking down the street, and it was like, well, how do I think of something that kind of references me, but also like Main Street businesses? And I kind of thought of that as I'm standing on the corner where the two street signs kind of meet. And that's kind of what we kind of came up with was, hey, this is where like Charlotte and Success meet on the corner of Main & Johnson. And then, a couple people said thumbs up and we went with it. So,
oh, it's a great name. And actually it's funny because you didn't tell me the story beforehand.
No, I didn't. I didn't know you were going to ask it that way either.
Yeah, but no, I did kind of think that's what this is about. I did know. So it is a good name. So it does get you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and you work with small businesses is what you do. You're helping small businesses grow.
Yes.
Basically.
And it's a fun thing to do. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for businesses as well, like the business owners. And, my father owned several restaurants kind of later in my kind of end of high school, beginning of college life, that span in my life. And, when he did it, he was kind of in his position where he had a nice role with a bigger company that owned a lot of restaurants. And then he was either going to have to find another role like that, which didn't exist as much for people without a degree and things, but he wound up buying them. And I mean, he's great at what he did. There was no issue with that. But the one thing he struggled with is that transition from being the person that ran the operation of the business to the person that now had to care for employees and worry about insurance and taxes and all the things we business owners kind of love. I'll say that loosely, but it really made it difficult for him. And he wound up having some health issues because of the stress that carried, and wound up having to sell the business because he relied on himself as an operator and an employee in his own business. And he wasn't in a fit position to do that. So that kind of stuck with me. I went as far away as possible from that notion and went into the Fortune 500 world my whole, previous career, and spent a lot of time. I worked for 3 different Fortune 500 companies, spent 20 some years in all sorts of different roles. And I say that because it kind of converges back to eventually when I wanted to do my own thing. It's like, how do I leverage what I've learned and am good at, and kind of have the vision to do something that's kind of close to my heart. And that was connecting with, smaller businesses that their livelihood solely depends on how well they run their business.
Right. Well, and as you're saying this, one of the things, if you've been listening to past episodes, I've recently gotten into the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. And as I'm doing it, I thought, oh, I've done a great job. This coming up on my 5th year. Business has been great. I've got 5 employees. We're really busy. And then I started this class, and I'm like, I didn't know all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I've gotten lucky. Is
Yeah.
what I've gotten. I've made some good decisions, but there are some things I just didn't know. And as I learn them, I am able to make better decisions. And so what you're doing is so important because it allows people to work on their business instead of in it.
Yeah. And one of the things I think is you kind of learn how you dialogue the right story about your business and why you exist to connect with people. And the thing is, it's rarely ever about what people don't know. I mean, I've used this analogy before, but like if you want to just talk overall health, I mean, you're not supposed to go through the drive-through and eat the value meal, for a meal. You shouldn't buy a burger out of a vending machine. Right. These things, but different things come up that force you to kind of fall into, yeah, I know I shouldn't do this, but this one time I'll do it and then I'll recover. That's not why we exist on the small business level. I mean, we don't come in and lay down and say, okay, we're going to tell you all the things you never thought about your business. No, it's much more about, how do we take what you should do and get you accountable to doing it and get you to where you want to go faster as a result? And that's really the heart of it. I try to tell people, I don't tell you what success looks like in your business. You tell me. I just work with you to figure out the path that's going to get you there quicker than you probably were going to do by yourself.
Right. No, and that's great because I think that's so often you go in, and when I would work with different coaches, I've worked with them and they go off on this tangent and I'm like, but that's not really where I am.
Yeah,
that's not the place I am. I really, or where I want to go. It's, so you do have to know, listen to your clients. I love that you're doing that. So you said, you send me a list of, let's talk about these things. And I have to tell you, usually I can guess, but an airline analogy. That was one of your talking points. So tell me your airline analogy.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I as I talk to my clients, it's a lot like, hey, how can you connect with people on something simple that everybody understands? So we tried to boil business down to what we call the airline analogy. And really a lot of it is, as you get into strategy and where you're headed, recognizing where you're at is the first step. I mean, if you don't know where you're at, where you're going doesn't matter because you don't even know where you're starting from. Right. And this is to try to help people understand, like, simply, here's where you could be in your business life cycle. And so we likened it to an airline, and I spent a lot of time on it. So it's near and dear to my heart. And I hope this is the most I ever complain about airlines again in my life. And they're great. I'm just teasing. But the analogy kind of starts out like this. Like when you get on a plane, like there's the first phase, which is takeoff. And so there's a lot of things that you yourself, have to do and the rest of the plane has to do in order to be qualified to take off. So this is like a business startup, right? It's a checklist. I mean, when you're starting up a business, you haven't really done anything yet. So all you're doing is checking boxes to get the right to go out and commercialize. Right. And same thing on a plane, like seat back in the upright and locked position, tray table stowed, bags underneath the seat in front of you, overhead compartments closed. I mean, basically everybody just sits there quietly, even the flight attendants and the pilots. And you say, hey, air traffic control, we're ready to roll. Everybody's in their seats and where they're supposed to be. I mean, you can't get up and go use the restroom at this point in time, right? I mean, it's a checklist. Same thing with business. It's like, okay, Do I have my business plan? Is it complete? Do I have financing? Do I need financing? Do I know where I'm going to get it? Is it commercial lending? Is it private investing? Do I have my vision mapped out? I may not need to know every step of the way, but what does this look like for me and what do I want it to be, or for us if you're, in a partnership? And it's a lot like that. I mean, once you get the green light, like, hey, you're cleared for takeoff. Hey, you've checked all these boxes in your business. You're ready to go out and start whatever you're setting out to do. And so that's what we call the takeoff phase. And then you have the second phase, which is, when you're on an airline, it's that ascension phase. So everything we need to do to get to 30,000 feet as fast as possible. And you notice, like, still nobody gets up and goes and use the restroom. Everybody's kind of like leaned back in their chairs and shooting up there. It's the same thing in your business. This is kind of your initial survival mode. Like, how do I create the business that I can sustain? But maybe right now I'm mostly focused on top line revenue because I have to have a minimum amount of income to be able to pay my bills,
Right.
to be able to pay myself. And so your focus here, when we work with business owners here and recognize where they're at, it's, let's not talk about what it's going to be like when you have 15 employees. I mean, it's great to have those ideation sessions, but right now you'll never get there if you don't focus on these 2 or 3 things. So we coach our clients down to really what they see as what matters most and what gets the biggest return. So it's all about acceleration and ascension. And same thing in an airline, other than the beep that you're listening for, the bell that goes off that tells you can get up and move around, everything at that point is focused on that. Then we get to kind of what we call our cruising altitude phase. And this is sort of like, if you're on a plane, this is where the loyalty kicks in, right? The drinks come out, the cookies and crackers come out, the snacks come out, people get up and move around. The pilot says something witty. It's very, it's very relaxed. And the reason is because you're not fighting for survival. You're not trying to get to 30,000 feet anymore. It's not to say this isn't a critical time in your business. Your focus is just different. In your business, you're starting to look at efficiency and effectiveness and profitability. And how do I put it together, a customer retention program? How do I focus on employee retention and make their experiences better? So a lot of it is about the experience. And for most people, their business life exists in that phase the longest. So you might have to adjust for turbulence. You might have to gain altitude, lower altitude, but you're not doing it as a point of survival anymore, or as a point to just get in the air and be on your way. And then the final piece we say is, at some point you're going to start that descension, right? And that's when you're going to look at, what am I going to do at the end of this business, whether I'm selling it, whether I'm, training my employees to take it over, and maybe I just collect a paycheck and sit on the beach with an umbrella drink and it's a great life.
Right.
Whatever that looks like, planning that out in advance can make it a smooth landing, which is what you want for that journey anyways. And I always joke when you're on a plane, it's like, how can you get to 30,000 feet in like 10 minutes? But yet they announced, we've started our descent. You still land an hour later.
Yes, exactly.
And the reason is it's just intended to be a very slow, smooth, basically intentional process to get there. So that's kind of how we talk with business owners. And, people can move back and forth between those spots, but predominantly if you can connect with one of those, then we know how to approach working with you in a way that's going to be most effective.
That's great. Yeah. And I love the analogy, because it does make you can walk through it and it is simple. Whereas a lot of times you hear people, especially in business, you'll hear people who want to show how smart they are. And so they use this language that other people are going, but they don't understand. They don't get it. And we've made the same point here. We don't speak digital. We speak about marketing in a way that everybody's going to understand what we're saying.
Right.
And it's important that you do that.
Yeah, it makes a difference. I mean, your relatability is a lot of, for us, for our small business customers, I mean, we work with them, 2, 3, 4 times a month, on a regular basis. I mean, they have to kind of like us and understand us, or else, we're going to annoy the heck out of them the whole time.
Exactly. Well, and what people forget is that when they're trying to seem smart, they often make the other person feel stupid.
Right.
And nobody wants to make their customers feel stupid.
Absolutely not.
Right. No. Nobody wants to do that. So, all right. I want to talk to you. So you talked about developing a strategy, working through a strategy, but so often we do that and we never go back and assess the strategy. Right.
You're right.
So let's talk a little bit about assessing strategy development.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've kind of, so I'll backtrack. One of the reasons why this is very important to me is when I was fortunate enough to work for the companies that I did, corporately on the Fortune 500 space, I was with companies that were very progressive about, internal development. And so the cool thing for me was, hey, I got a chance to like try different positions, not because my educational background warranted it, but because, you build a rapport, you have a work ethic that people like, and they're willing to give you a chance for your development. But one of the themes across the whole way throughout that was, hey, this is one of those things where it's like, you're going to be in these roles and you've got a strategic element to all of them. And so I started to see how the different, individual silos that you were in, the strategies for like sales or a marketing strategy, how they all built up to a business strategy. So one of the fun things in that is now taking that back and looking at that with our customer base, with some of the bigger companies we work with even, is really kind of aligning on what does that mean? What does strategy development mean to you? And how does that look? And one of the things that we start with is, what is that vision that you've got? And we want to always be working towards that. Not every strategy has to get you to the end of that line, that vision, but it should make some sense in where you're at now and where you want to get to relative to that. I think a mistake, if I'm being honest, that I see a lot of people do in the corporate world, we did over and over and over again, is strategy isn't about what more can we do. Strategy is about really the rationalization of resources and where we deploy them. So what I'm basically saying by that, if we were just going back, is that really like consultants speak? And now what does it really mean? It means, what are we saying no to? Because too many times we're saying yes to everything and then we don't get anything done, and we don't have anything to assess because we never got very far. So we work through a process with customers to kind of get them to that point of, okay, here's what you do want to do. What don't you want to do to make sure that you can put the resources to that? You've got finite resources. You only have so much people, time, and money that you can use. So where are you putting that? And what's most important? And we'll go through some different things. Like every company's different and their needs are different, but exercises like, what do you know? What do you think you know? And what don't you know? Because a lot of people feel like anything in that I think I know becomes I know. And that's just not true. And so you've got to put time and energy. If you need to figure this out, what do I need to do in order to be able to draw that in? I mean, you probably know this, you probably do a lot of this as well, but what are the outside influences that affect your strategy as well? And how are you coping with those? What are your leading indicators and lagging indicators, so you can see where I'm at? And obviously it filters down into, what are my milestones and KPIs I'm looking at? What are my goals this year if my strategy is this to go do? So there's a lot to it. And I think, sometimes we have a tendency to go right after the do part of business, which is, how do I get everybody doing what they should be doing? But a lot of it also is, what do we need to be? And cultural change in organizations is difficult, but sometimes if your employees, if they all are some version of themselves better down the road, then now you're going to get a different outcome from their efforts and those resources. It's a starting point, but that's a lot of just kind of that assessment phase of this.
Right. Well, and I loved what you said. People, what do I know? What do I think I know? And what do I still need to learn? Right. And one of the things that we see a lot is people who think they know something, and to think they know, they'll say something along the lines of, oh, there's no competition in this area of my business. And oftentimes, almost always, I can point out immediately, well, what about this company or that company or this? And they're like, oh, I don't know, because they don't spend the time looking at that. And that's a dangerous thing to do, not spending the time looking at who that competition is.
You're 100% right. And sometimes the competition doesn't look like you. And I mean, what I mean that is, like, if you're a digital marketing company, you can obviously identify other digital marketing companies, right? I mean, they look like you. I mean, they may not do things like you, but they look like you. Well,
yeah, but they look like me.
What's a technology that might be developed right now? Like, I always think about it. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, were the print marketing people sitting around thinking, hey, how do we beat the other print marketers? Probably. Were they thinking about, what's something, this digital thing that I've heard about, what could that be like? Well, it's nothing. It doesn't look like us. It doesn't matter. Well, big change.
And it was a big change. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the book market and, right? If you look at the books and
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we kind of spend a lot of time with that, because usually you see, you recognize what looks like you, and you can plan around that. Even if it's like, hey, I'm going to take share from my competition. Great. If you know who they are, you know how to probably figure out how to go do it. If you
Right.
don't, if you're not expecting it, and it's a substitute type material, you're not looking at it at all. And so we try to flush those out to say, we're not going to spend all day long on all these what ifs, but we should recognize what they are and make sure that we're giving it some credence, that we haven't taken our eye off of it, and recognize what could change the whole layout of how we perform what we do.
Right, absolutely. So, all right, let's talk about something that I find very difficult for people.
Yeah.
Is the price discussion. So, I'm so sorry. I just remembered, I'm trying to remember where I heard it, but somebody was talking about the one sells thing. Oh, it was a BNI. It was the BNI convention. And they were talking about the one sells strategy nobody is using, or most people fail to use. And it was at the end of a conversation where you go in and you're meeting with a client saying, and what comes next is, because it gives you that opportunity to actually say, let's close this deal now, right?
Yeah.
And most people don't get to that. But the price discussion is part of that. So let's talk a little bit about price discussion.
Yeah, and I'll say, and price is obviously a major component of what we do, and we like to relate price and value, and that's fantastic, because that really is what the core of the conversation is. I mean, price is really just a function of getting paid for what you're worth, right? I mean, we all know that, and that isn't a static thing. But as we look at price, I think when I talk with business owners and even some bigger companies, it's always the risk of losing somebody over price that haunts them. That's what makes them lose sleep. And, I mean, you can look at statistics, and this is not, don't quote this source or anything, but like you can get online and like what percentage of people make price buying decisions. And yeah, there's some industries that are much more price focused. I mean, if you're a commodity trader, that is your main lever, but if you're like most of us, we're all trying to differentiate. We're all trying to provide value. So price becomes less of the identifier to what you do than probably what you think. And I mean, the common thing I've heard is 10% of the buyers out there make price their decision. And so if that's the case, and it's 10%, then that means 90% of the rest of the people that work with you probably are with you for a reason outside of the amount they pay you for your product or service. And knowing that is key to being able to have this price discussion. But I always think of, we go through things with companies where we do customer segmentation modeling, and not every customer is worth what they're paying to you. And it's not disparaging anybody's customer base, but let's just be honest. Some of you have customers that pay the same price as others. And this one customer, they accept everything you say, and they're so easy to work with, and you enjoy every conversation. And then the flip side of that is this other customer that's paying the same price is on the phone with you 10 times a week, talking to you about something that's not right. And it's like, this is like a 5-cent conversation. This isn't worth any of our time. Right.
Right.
Those people
Absolutely.
you. They cost you more despite their price, because you're spending time, which is money and all of that. And we always kind of say, you get those bottom end customers that when you actually calculate out and segment them out, you see that while they either need a price increase to cover the cost of us doing business with them, or let's go ahead and gift our competition our worst customers and let them know we're gonna go ahead and send them your way. They're great. We just can't take them on right now. And now you've freed up space to go get customers that recognize your value and are willing to pay the price you're asking for.
Absolutely. And that's the hardest thing. I mean, we've let people go, and the decision came down to you're actually costing us money.
Right.
And we're not making money off of you at all. And that we can't run a business that way.
Right.
But the other part of that was something I learned very early on, is the people who come to you and you give them a price and they come back and say, can you do it for less? I don't even continue the conversation.
Right.
I don't even say, no, I can't do it for less. I say, I think this probably won't work, because those are the people who are going to be the most difficult going forward.
And I love that you mentioned that, because I can tie this back to the airline analogy too. So your business is probably in a spot where you have the ability to pick and choose who you work with. And that's where we all want to be, by the way. So, right. Of course we do.
Yes.
And sometimes when we have customers that are in that ascension phase where every dollar matters, we talk to them about like, okay, right now you're not in a position where you can start turning down people willing to pay you for what you do, but recognize that can't be the notion long term. So let's go ahead and work with them. But you're right, because in the end, if they're asking you that up front, that's a huge red flag, because they're going to ask you that question all the time. And
Yes.
eventually they're going to whittle you down to the point where you're like, now I just don't even want to work with them. And you're
Right.
not helping them at that point. They'd be better
Right.
off finding somebody that's willing to work with them in a price capacity and has the ability to do that than you are, because you're going to regret signing them on, probably not going to treat them the way you'd really want to. And it's not good for either party.
No, absolutely not. And what happens is that the same ones, so they may not come back to you and say, oh, well, can you do this for less? And can you do that for less? But what they do is slowly say, oh, can you handle this?
Right.
And so their scope creep, it just comes, it is enormous at that point.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, in the end, while price, gets all the attention, I mean, customer profitability is really what we're after. And I mean, you want to make sure that you're in a sustainable place where I'm making enough that I can't wait to service you. Like,
right.
I can't wait to make everything that I offer click for you in such a wonderful way that you're going to go brag about me. And price is the mechanism that we talk about, because we don't have our cost side in line too. I mean, it's much easier to go out and tell somebody, oh, we're going to raise price, and then you backtrack from it and you just settle for like, well, okay. But when you get that margin in the right spot, price becomes more of a conduit to where you're headed, not necessarily just the simple fact of which customers make the most sense where you're at.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We are almost done, but I wanted to ask you, tell me your advice for 2021 for business owners. And is it more? Is it, just this year, you're going to give us our advice, or do you have something that's going to last us forever?
Yeah. So the thing that I would come back and say, and I actually, this did not make me a prognosticator or a forecaster, but we started working a little bit towards the end of 2019 with our customer base, saying, hey, we've been in a really good market for almost 10 years now. I'm in a growing market year over year. And most of us haven't run our businesses prior to that 10 years. So we kind of get lumped into this category. And, I dealt with this early on. It was frustrating because, you talk about helping somebody grow their business and like, well, why do I need to hire you? My business is growing every year. And that's true. And I don't want to take that away, but that's like pure market growth. And what I mean by that is, if you exist in this big pie that's your market, right? And that pie keeps growing year over year, your slice grows inherently just for participating. But what
Right.
happens if the pie stops getting bigger? You're going to either stay stagnant, or if the pie starts shrinking and your strategy is only to go out and be available, then you're going to start losing business, because everybody is. And so what we
Right.
try to tell people at that point is like, we were like, hey, a recession's coming. Well, okay, we missed it. Instead, it was a pandemic. Okay, so
Right.
change things, right? And so I think the advice is, we don't know what the future holds. We clearly now have a better perspective on, we don't have control over everything as business owners. What other strategies are you looking at outside of just participating in a growing market? Like, what's your share gain strategy? How are you going to make your slice bigger at the expense of your competition slice?
Right.
How are you looking at substitution? And we talked a little bit about this, like what happens when digital marketing shows up in the print marketing arena and nobody saw it coming? Like, what are the things you could go take over that could benefit from your services, that allow, even if it's not your business, but the awareness you generate, like create more people that want to be in your pie. And if they buy from your competition, great, because you just increased your market size. You can just go fight for them later if you don't get them up front. That's share gain again. So there.
Right.
And then what are the other like adjacencies that you could be looking at in your business? Like, I have a bookkeeper. I use this example a lot, but a bookkeeper that she really wanted to focus on her current clients. Well, how do you deal with the clients that, want to bring it in-house and do their own bookkeeping? She was like, well, I don't know how to make money off of those. And it's like, well, why don't you get QuickBooks certified, go through the training, and you can train those businesses on how to install and run QuickBooks in their own organizations, and they're paying you as well. And now
Right.
you're the expert. So maybe down the road, they change their mind and then they come back to you. So creating new revenue streams, or participating in a pie that you're not currently in. So
Yes.
it's
And
really
actually,
about,
that's where the pandemic came in, right? I mean, a lot of people, they panicked, but it was okay. They did that, what they everybody called pivoting, but
yep.
really all they did was add a new revenue stream,
Yep.
so that when this is over, now, they have a brick and mortar store and an online store,
Yeah,
which,
absolutely.
by the way, they put off for 10 years because they knew they needed the online store.
But they were having enough people come through the front doors that they were like, well, this isn't that urgent.
Right.
So
Exactly.
That's probably the biggest thing, is just recognize that we don't know what is coming, and it's like diversifying your financial portfolio. You're better off having money coming in different ways and different strategies than just, continuing down that same path that we found success in up to now. I mean, change before it's required, not after.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was great advice. And it is something that so many of us don't think about. How do we make this better? Yeah, I'm a roofer. How do I put on a better roof? Well,
Right.
okay, maybe we don't put on a better roof. Maybe what we're doing instead is adding siding to our mix, or maybe
Exactly.
instead we're adding kitchen design, because you're diversifying. And I think it's something that too many businesses aren't thinking about. So that is really, really good advice. So
Awesome.
how do people find you?
Yeah. So the best way, if you want to connect with us online, businessconsultingcharlotte.com is our website. So that kind of gives an overview of what we do and an easy place to connect with us. We're also out on social media. So kind of on the Facebook end, we're at Main and AND. I know you had the little, was it ampersand earlier?
Oh, I did. Yes.
Yeah. No, that's actually our name, but Facebook won't let you use that. So it's Main and AND Johnson. And then the other place you can find us on LinkedIn, so you could connect with me, Brian Johnson 28120, or you can look up Main and Johnson. We've got a page going there as well.
That's awesome. That's great. All right, you stick around. Let me get back to everybody else and reminding them how important it is for them to subscribe. There you go. It is very important for you to subscribe. If you are listening to this as a podcast, subscribe wherever you're listening. That is one of the best ways to help us out. The other is to go onto youtube.com/Brendan and Annie and subscribe there. If you help us out there, that would mean a lot to our business. If you've already subscribed and you're like, I just love this podcast and I so want to help Ann, then leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. Leave it out there and let other people know how we're doing, or share it with your friends. That will help us as well. So I will see everybody next week. We have about a month and a half. I think it's about 6 more episodes before we switch over to Marketing Moms with Anastasia, and that's going to be a lot of fun. But until then, we'll still have lots more people coming. You can follow us or find us at asmmdigital.com. We've got all of the podcasts we have done. They're all there in video format and podcast format. So whichever way you want to do it, you can find all of them there, as well as our blog and how to start working with us. So please do go over there, check that out, asmmdigital.com. Let me come back to Brian. So Brian, thank you so much. This has been really wonderful having you on.
I appreciate it, and this is a lot of fun too. It's great.
Yeah, this is great. All right, everybody else, we will see you next week. Take care.